If you missed our last video, we are spending 2 weeks living in Canmore, staying with Rosh's uncle.
My uncle and auntie have lived in Canmore for the last almost 20 years, which makes them pretty good personal tour guides.
We've now explored so much of Canmore on foot, by car, by bike, and even kayak. So now it's time for us to come into Banff National Park and see what it has in store for us.
But Banff National Park is absolutely massive and we have a lot planned.
So make sure you stay tuned for our second video, which will explore the town of Banff and explore its two most famous lakes being Moraine Lake and Lake Louise.
But for now, let's go check out Banff's other famous lakes and maybe go for a hike.
Our first stop in Banff National Park is Johnston Lake. Now there are a lot of very well-known lakes in Banff National Park, Lake Louise, Lake Moraine, but there are so many other lakes that are just as beautiful, like Johnston Lake, and that's why it's our first stop in here. Guys, this lake is so beautiful, and the best thing is it is super quiet and not crowded at all. There's probably 3 people here aside from us, and they're kind of walking around the lake. Rosh's uncle said it's about an hour to walk around the lake, which is nice, so we're probably not going to do it today. We've got a lot of different lakes to visit, but it's just so serene. And I think this is the perfect time of year to visit Banff because it's still open, so it's not been shut yet for the snow. Some of the lakes do shut, like Lake Moraine, but the mountains have some snow on them. It's past the peak tourist season, so it's a lot more quiet than it would be during summer, and it's just beautiful. It's not too cold yet. Couldn't recommend it more.
And the lake actually feeds into this little creek type thing, so you can walk over the bridge over the creek, or you can just stand here, look out into the lake and listen to the calming sounds of water running. If you don't need to go to the toilet. If you did, you probably, it would make it worse, but right now I'm okay. We have made it to our second lake here in Banff, and it's called Twojack Lake. The colours are truly out of this world. The only place I've ever seen lakes these types of colours is here in Canada. I really hope you guys are seeing the blue that I'm seeing right now. It's really amazing. And I've just been told that this lake used to be used as part of a triathlon here in Banff. This was the swimming section. Apparently it is icy cold, and it was done at the same time of year as right now. Now we're lucky today, it's about 8 to 10 degrees, it's not too bad, but I think the water would be absolutely freezing given that it comes from a glacier. But I mean, what a cool location to do a triathlon. These days it's a very popular location for kayaking, or just like what we're doing, having a look, taking it in. It's very nice. We have made it to Lake 3, Minnewanka here in Banff, and man oh man, do I have a fun fact for you that Uncle Paul just told me. So years ago, this was a lot more shallow because that dam over there was not there. But they decided to dam control it, built the dam, which meant that the area flooded, and the town, there was a town that used to stand here. The town flooded, and that town is now obviously underwater, which is why this area is now a really popular spot for scuba diving, because you can go under the water and see that town. What? Now this lake truly is massive. It's so big that it's actually the only lake that allows motorized boats, and the boats, there are different boat tours that you can do that take you further out into the lake because it's that big.
This lake is absolutely massive, and Rosh's uncle just told us that in winter it actually mostly freezes over and you can come ice skating here, which is pretty cool. I think we need to come back to Canada in winter because I'm loving the snow. I'd love to go ice skating. I mean, it's super beautiful now, but just imagine snow everywhere. It would be absolutely beautiful. I'm sure once we experience the cold and shoveling snow and all of that, we'll reconsider, but it's definitely on the bucket list. All throughout Banff National Park, they have these red chairs in all different spots. They have them here at Lake Minnewanka, and we saw them earlier at Lake Twojack as well. Rosh's uncle says they're all throughout Banff. They make for a beautiful photo spot because the red really stands out against obviously the natural landscapes, but it's pretty cool. We're going to visit a few of them hopefully. Now while this is known to most of us as Lake Minnewanka, to the locals, the Stony people who are the indigenous people to this area, it is known as Lake Minnewanka or the Lake of the Spirits.
And if you have a car, it's very easy to get between all 3 of these lakes in the one morning or one afternoon. From Johnston Lake to Twojack Lake, it's about a 5-10 minute drive, and then similar from Twojack Lake to Minnewanka Lake. So if you have a car, you've definitely got to put all 3 of those lakes on your to visit list because it's so easy to do so, and they're all equally worth visiting. we have come to the remnants of Bankhead, which was a town back in the early 1900s. It was a mining town and it was very short-lived. I think it was only around for about 18 years and then they closed it all off. But it is pretty cool to come and see because they still have some of the buildings. Well, in Banff, they actually have some of the buildings standing as like a historical site, but you can do this walking tour, which is what we're doing now, and see some of the buildings that still stand here, as well as some of the coal carriages too. It's pretty interesting.
So the lamp house was super important in the whole mining operation here. So each day when a miner would go out, it would be assigned a lamp, and then at the end of the day it would return its lamp. So if any of the lamps were missing, then it was a sign that one of the miners hadn't returned and a search operation would be initiated. So definitely a very important role.
Guys, being in this part of Canada, we're obviously in bear country, and when we're doing walking trails like this, I'm always kind of like looking in every direction every couple of seconds because I know they're around somewhere. What's probably more realistic is that I'm being watched by a cougar, because people say that you probably never see a cougar, but the cougar will always see you. Stace would argue that I'm a cougar. Guys, we've stopped off to have a look at the Hoodoos, also known as the fairy chimneys or earth pyramids, and these things are very interesting to look at. They're tall, thin spires of rock formed by erosion, and it's interesting because there is soft rock on the bottom and hard rock on the top, and the hard rock acts like an umbrella, which is why these things remain standing.
We're now on our way up to Surprise Corner Viewpoint, which has incredible viewpoints of one of the most famous hotels in the world, which is the Fairmont. It's known for looking a little bit like Hogwarts. It's going to be pretty beautiful. Now guys, you can see behind me the main attraction, which is the Fairmont Hotel. In the distance you can also see another green type building, which is another 5-star hotel, and if you look super carefully you might be able to spot the cable car which goes up Sulphur Mountain.
And speaking of the Fairmont Hotel, it's time we have a little tour of the inside. Outside they have this little dome which is used for dining experiences where you go in, it's nice and cozy no matter what the weather is outside. So I can only imagine how cool that would be in the middle of winter with it being completely blanketed in snow outside, and then you get to sit in that little dome and eat a nice cozy meal. We have now come to check out the ballroom, which is extremely old-fashioned, but it is an old-fashioned in a kind of refreshing way. You don't see this very often these days.
May I have a dance?
And then from the ballroom you walk into the conservatory, which has equally amazing views to pretty much anywhere from this hotel. Now, this is going to sound a bit weird, but the bathrooms here are pretty much a tourist attraction in themselves. They're so old-fashioned. They have full-length mirrors and a pre-bathroom room. It has very nice views, but also a lounge chair, massive mirrors. It's very old-fashioned, pretty interesting tiling. It's a cool spot. We have now come to a spot that's fairly well known here at the Fairmont. It's known as the Bridal Stairs, and the story goes that years and years ago a bride fell down these stairs. They're not sure how. I think the theory is that she tripped and fell down and died on her wedding day, and since then there have been multiple reports of sightings of the bride or glowing kind of paranormal type experiences. I read that some people hear kind of wedding music, and it all kind of happens around this staircase area since the bride died. A bit spooky. Another famous ghost here at the Fairmont is Sam the Bellman. Reports go that sometimes he is so lifelike he gets mistaken as a real human bellman. But I believe he's a friendly ghost. He actually helps people, and even in his death he's doing his job. Guys, we are lucky enough to come to the majestic suite here at the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel. This suite has been home to a huge amount of famous people. One being the Queen. The Queen stayed here years and years ago, which is pretty incredible. Now, I hear that it costs a minimum of about $2,000 to $5,000 a night to stay in this suite, which is why we're probably only going to spend about 2 minutes in here. But it is very cool to see, and the views are incredible.
Hello.
I am in the presence of the toilet that the Queen used. How many of you can say that you've ever been in a similar situation? I feel like a celebrity.
We're now on the outskirts of the main street of Banff town, and this is quite an iconic photo spot with the bridge leading into the town and with Cascade Mountain in the background. I've definitely seen a few photos myself of this spot and it's pretty beautiful.
And to get that iconic photo here in Banff, you want to come to the headquarters of Parks Canada here in Banff. It's this pretty nice looking building with really nice gardens out the front, looking out onto that bridge and onto Cascade Mountain. As I said, the gardens here are really beautiful. I would describe it almost as a bit of a merge between like Canadian theme, but also kind of Japanese Zen garden type theme. And I've heard as well, around Christmas time, they put on something called the Spirit of Christmas, I think, where they put on like an interactive type show with different lights and even kind of simulate the northern lights, which I think would be really cool to see. Guys, we're driving through the golf course near the Fairmont Hotel and we found a bear. And that black bear makes it 3 from 5 of the Big 5 Rosh and Stace edition in Canada. Well guys, it seems that the Fairmont grounds is the place to come if you are looking to see some wildlife, because this is where we saw elk and that massive black bear. And you can see behind me a group of female elk. Elks? A group of animals. So if you're keeping track, we have seen 3 of the Big 5. We saw the sheep, we saw the elk, we've seen the bear, the black bear. Are we going to see the other 2? Fingers crossed, come on.
And now after some of those crazy wildlife encounters, we've come here to marvel at the beauty of Bow Falls, which leads into the Bow River, which goes all through Banff and Canmore and is incredibly beautiful.
We have now popped over to the cave and Basin, and immediately after stepping out of the car, you're met with this very strong smell of sulphur. And a fun fact for you about the cave and Basin is that it is the birthplace of Canada's national parks.
Holy hell, Rosh.
Well guys, I said that I could smell sulphur outside the car, but man, oh man, it bloody stinks in here.
Okay, so that hole in the cave roof above me is actually how they discovered this cave, and that's how it became the birthplace of national parks in Canada.
Okay guys, we're gonna go outside now because I got a really good fact for you. Right behind me in this thermal bath lives Banff's most endangered species, and it's a snail, which I never would have expected. It's the Banff spring snail, and it's a very, very tiny snail. It's about the size of an apple seed, so they're very hard to see, but they're very few in numbers, and they tend to live on the sides of thermal springs, I believe. Now, interestingly as well, that sandy area of the thermal springs, I just overheard, leads down to like 3 kilometers down to the Earth's core. Wow. Guys, we found some mountain sheep again. I know that we saw them the other day in Canmore, but look at this. They are mountain sheep on a mountain. To finish off our first day here in Banff, we have come to this viewpoint that looks out onto the city of Banff.
It is our second day here in Banff National Park, and it's time for us to go on a bit of a hike. Now, according to people who do hike, this is more of a walk, and for people who never hike like us, it's a hike. So I'm expecting it to be about a moderate difficulty, but it is Johnston Canyon, so we're excited. Hopefully it won't be too difficult, and hopefully we'll see some pretty views along the way. Now, we're feeling a little worse for wear today. If you have watched our video exploring everything to do in Canmore, we went for a bike ride yesterday, which is in that video. If you haven't seen it, we'll link it up here. But we're feeling very sore, but we figure there's no better way to get our muscles moving again than to head on a hike. So hopefully it helps get things moving, but yeah, it's sore.
I am so strong. Look at the dint I just put in this tree.
Okay guys, we've made it to the lower falls here at Johnston Canyon. As you can see, it's pretty beautiful. There is actually a line today to get to a really cool photo spot where you kind of go through a cave and then obviously have the waterfall behind you. So we're going to keep heading up to the upper falls and maybe stop for a photo on the way back down.
We have made it to the falls, and Uncle Paul just told me 2 people have kayaked down this 100-foot waterfall. What? And in the winter, this entire rock face freezes over. so it's all completely covered in ice. So much so that a lot of people ice pick and climb up to the top of the cliff. And that's because there's a lot of seepage, water seepage through the rocks, particularly that big black coloured one right there. And if you ever do come to Johnston Canyon, when you make it up to the 10-foot waterfall, make sure you do make it all the way up, because we were just down at the bottom of the waterfall. A lot of people don't realise that the trail continues and you can come all the way up to the top. And from up here I can see attached to some of the trees some ropes for when it does freeze over. The people that climb the ice can attach their rope to those ropes and then safely climb up.
There we go, so we made it to the upper falls. Now if you did want to keep going, it's about another 3 kilometers up to what are called the ink pots, which are essentially like, as I understand, kind of colourful pools that are all different colours due to some sort of ink in them, which sounds pretty cool. But another 3 kilometers from the upper falls, so it was about an hour to the upper falls, maybe a bit more. So just have to plan that in if you are coming to Johnston Canyon, but even just to the upper falls, it was absolutely beautiful.
And we're going to finish our time here at Johnston Canyon by going through the cave to face the waterfall. Well guys, we lined up for about 15-20 minutes and I have to say it was worth it. You really get the full impact of facing a waterfall.
It's so loud in here.
It was so loud, but really, really cool.
We've now just made a little pit stop at this small viewpoint where you can see Castle Mountain in the background. It actually used to be called Mount Eisenhower, but now known as Castle Mountain. It's pretty incredible.
We have now left Alberta. We've crossed the border into British Columbia, so we're not actually, technically, not in Banff National Park anymore, but we have come to Marble Canyon. I believe it's a pretty short, easy hike to get to the good stuff. Guys, just like many of my Instagram captions, this canyon is deep. Guys, this canyon is so deep. Like, it doesn't feel like we're that high up, and we're not really that high up. It's just, it goes so deep down into the earth.
One of the really cool things I'm finding about Marble Canyon is that pretty much as soon as you start the walk from the car park, you can see the canyon almost immediately, and you can kind of go as far or as not far as you want, because there are all these different bridge viewpoints that cut across the canyon, and you can look down and see how deep it is and see the water flowing. So it's a really great spot if you're not sure you want to kind of commit to anything too long to get a nice view. You can kind of come in and take it as you want and still get nice views.
And just like in Banff, we found some red chairs. Perfect for photos.
And of course, as always, when hiking anywhere, but particularly in places where it does get a bit cooler, stay on the trails. They are there for a reason. They're specifically mapped out to make them safe. They have guardrails, because when you go off the trail, unfortunately bad things can happen. Even if you think you might be okay, you know, here in Canada, particularly here we're in British Columbia now, it can get very, very cold and icy and slippery. So very important to stay on the trails. Also helps the wildlife out a little bit.
This is a really easy hike to the top of the falls, and my uncle said it's not often on a tourist trail, so often people will miss it. But I really recommend coming here. It's really, really awesome to see just how deep that canyon goes, particularly if you're like Stacey and I, who haven't exercised in a while and are looking for the more simpler hikes. Highly recommend. And we have one more quick stop before we head back to Banff National Park. We have come to Numa Falls, another beautiful natural water feature here in Canada. And what's really standing out to me about these falls is the surface of the rock. The rocks are so smooth and shiny with the water kind of glistening off them. They almost look like marble. And like so many other places we've seen over the last couple of days, the water here is crystal clear. Back onto the shapes of the rock, you can see on the sides there's kind of like curved areas that look almost like natural hot tubs made from the rock. I can only imagine how long a period of time, like thousands, millions maybe even, of years it would take for the water to erode the rock into that kind of shape. I only wish that it was possible that the water here would get warm enough for it to actually feel like a hot tub. But I think it probably wouldn't happen, because chances are this is water from a glacier. And you can see in parts that the water is kind of like twisting or whirling around just from the force of the waterfall, and I'd say that that's probably, like, those forces over huge periods of time are responsible for those, as I said, natural hot tubs, natural cold tubs, natural pools, rock pools. I'm no geologist, I know nothing. Alright, now I think it's time to head back to Banff National Park. I'll see you there.
And that is everything for our first video in Banff. Make sure you stay tuned for part 2 where we head to the famous Moraine Lake and Lake Louise and do a few other bits and pieces like exploring this beautiful town.